Hello, welcome to the online recorded lecture of GAP 3, the employee role in service. Actually, to qualify, this is a re-recording because the first time I recorded it, there was apparently no sound. So that's not going to work. So let's talk about the employee role. And we're continuing our discussion of GAP 3 here. So the employee roles in service, we'll talk about the service culture, the critical importance of service employees, boundary spanning roles, strategies for delivering, and then customer-oriented service delivery. Those are our focuses here. So what's a service culture? A culture where an appreciation for good service exists, and where giving good service to internal as well as ultimately external customers is considered a natural way of life and one of the most important norms by everyone in the organization. That's from one of the gurus of services marketing and services management, Grunros. Now, the key here to realize is this is talking about internal and external. Okay, that's a critical element here, a critical role here. So we make promises, right? In order to we have to make promises based on understanding of customer needs, and we learned those in the first two gaps. Managing those expectations. Traditional marketing communications are a way that we let the customer know what to expect. Our sales and promotion does the same. Advertising, internet, website, all those communications, things we'll talk about more in GAP 4, those are all ways that we make promises to customers on the type of service that's going to be delivered. So keeping those promises, that's what our role is here in GAP 3. The service delivery, the RADER, right? Reliability, responsiveness, empathy, assurance, tangibles. It's also about what we've talked about in terms of recovery, flexibility. Those are all part of the delivery of the service. Whether it's face-to-face, telephone, online communications, all aspect of it. It's the entire customer experience from beginning to end. Okay, so the customer interacts with subcontractors as well and our business partners along the way, whether it be at a hotel, whether it's a valet service, or whether it's using a reservation system to make a reservation at a restaurant that is not yours. In the U.S., we have Open Table, for example. That interaction with them and the expectation then that's going to be passed on to the actual delivery of the service. And all of this relates back to something we talked about in the very beginning, moments of truth. And remember, that goes from the parking lot all the way through to the bill that you receive at the end in terms of a restaurant experience. So all the moments of truth along the way. That's what we're talking about in terms of the employee. So to enable those promises, we have to hire the right people. We've talked about that. Train and develop those people to deliver the service. Empower those employees. I'm going to talk more about that later on as well. Supporting systems. Appropriate technology, rewards and incentives. All of these are things that we have to do as management in order to enable the employee. Now we're talking about our service delivery person, how we employ them and what they are able to do to make the objective. So, and we go back to the services triangle. And you remember that we talked about there's the company, the employees, and the customers. Okay. The internal marketing aspect is what we're talking about in terms of GAP 3 as a whole. It's the company getting the process and the procedures to the employees. But when we're talking about the employee in the delivery of the service, we're talking about the interactive marketing, the employees to the customers. In GAP 4, we'll talk more about the company to the customers, setting the promise in the first place. But we're focusing here, sorry about that, oops, wrong direction. We're focusing here on the interactive marketing aspect, right? The critical importance of those employees. So the employees, we need to look at them. They are the service. They're who we are. They're the representation of the tangibility of what we actually are, right? And the organization, they're what the organization is seen as by the customers. In other words, in the customer's eyes, this is who we are. They're our brand. You working out there in the field, you are the brand of who we are. They're also the marketers. Now, maybe that's not their official role, but every employee has a marketing role within the organization. So the importance is that it's a service mix. It's about the people. It's about the service profit chain, which I'll talk about in a minute, and the service triangle. Okay, those are the key elements here: the service marketing mix of people, the service profit chain, and the services triangle. So ways to use this service marketing triangle. The element of the interactive, for example. Looking at our strategic assessment. How is the service organization doing on all three sides? How is it doing on all three sides? How's it doing to employer, to employee? How is it doing to the company, rather, to the customer? And how is it doing with the employee to the customer? Right? Where are our weaknesses? How do we find those things? We've talked a little bit about this before. Critical incident reports, evaluating our peer review sites. Right? What are our strengths? What are the areas that the compliments that many of you gave? What are the areas that we are doing well in terms of our employees now? This is all related to the employees here. We're talking about how the employees are doing. So the specific service implementation then is what is being promoted and by whom. In other words, who are we targeting and what is the kind of service that we're willing to do? You heard in Brian Linden's presentation that he promotes the fact that they hire a high percentage of local people, and that's a key element of what they promote. So they have to make sure that they can communicate effectively by teaching them English. How will it be delivered and by whom? Again, that goes back to being able to put the right people in the right places. And are the supporting systems in place to deliver the promise of services? Those are the key elements that we have to look at. Now, I mentioned before the service profit chain. And we're going to come back to this, and we're going to talk about this when we close all the gaps in the end, and we're going to do a little exercise that group will do in a debate about this. But the key elements here to look at is ultimately we want revenue and profitability, right? We want revenue and profitability. So if the key is that our internal service quality leads to employee satisfaction, which leads to employee retention, employee productivity, which leads to an external service value to the customer who is then satisfied and loyal, and they come back. So just to simplify, if we put the systems in place for our employees, we get the right people in place, they're happy, they're satisfied, they deliver the kind of service that we want, the customer is going to be satisfied, leads to more revenue and profitability. Yes or no? For you to talk about. Now, we'll talk about this later, as I said, in more detail, but the point would be, if you deliver high service quality, do you make better revenue growth and profitability? Service employees are the services. I said they are the organization in their eyes. They're the brand and the marketers. The importance of that evidence, well, basically, this is what I said earlier in terms of where they're at. So, service employees, who are they? They're the boundary spanners. I'll talk more about what a boundary spanner is in a minute. What are the jobs like? It's emotional labor, right? It's not just about physical labor. It's not just about your appearance and how you look and the physical evidence of who you are or what you're trying to represent. It's about the emotional labor. We are human beings. Some days we have good days. Some days are not good days. So that has to be factored into the equation. We need people in there who represent the kind of thing we want. So there are many sources of this potential. Person role, what their role is, the organization versus the client, understanding who they are, the inter-client relationship, that's the customers, which we're going to talk about later in another section about the role of the customer in the service, and the quality and productivity. So at some point we could say we want to deliver such perfect one-to-one type aspect of it that our productivity falls apart. And that's something we have to be cautious of. If you do that consciously and you know that it's going to affect your productivity, that's fine. But we also have to be cognizant of maybe what rate we're charging in the process of things. So let's talk about a boundary spanner. When we did the blueprint, we basically talked about boundary spanners. So if you're talking about those employees, service delivery people who are interacting directly with the customer, the on-stage people in the concept of the blueprint, we're talking about those internal and external constituents and how they interact directly with that customer. That's the boundary spanner. So a front desk person is a boundary spanner. A server is a boundary spanner. The people who work in the back of the house, they're not boundary spanners. They're not interacting, unless of course you happen to be in a kitchen that's an open kitchen, then they might have some role there. But it's that interaction here with the customer themselves. So if you as the employee are in the middle and you're the representative of the business, whatever that business in the hospitality industry is, you're the representative to the external aspect. That's a boundary spanner. That's a boundary spanner. So boundary spanner roles, they provide a critical link between external customer environment and internal operations. Okay, so they are, as we've said, they represent who you are. All right? They serve a critical function in understanding, filtering, interpreting information, resources, and from the organization to its external constituents. So they're not only just the voice of the internal aspect of things, the external aspect to the customer, they're also the internal aspect. They know what the customer is telling them. So they're supposed to be telling management, you, what they should be knowing about those customers themselves. They're interpreting the information and the resources of what those external customers say. So is it a high stress job? I know a number of you already know that. Yes, absolutely, it's a high stress job. Now, this is a question that I'm going to leave for the group to actually ask you. It was done as a poll, but I'm finding that most of you are not doing the poll, so we'll talk about it in class. Which of the following is not a boundary spanner? And that completes the lecture on employee roles.